Shrink the Nation is a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably with a pour in hand. The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the hosts and guests only, and do not reflect the views of any employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or family members, especially our family members. They've asked us to be very clear about that. This show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said here should be taken as medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. If you're in crisis, call a professional. If you're mad at something we said, we suggest journaling or emailing us with civility. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers. We're clinicians, not your clinicians, and we have the bourbon to prove it. Let's go. All right, welcome back. Here we are, Shrink the Nation on the couch with America. All right, gentlemen, I've got 4 psychiatrists here. Quick roundtable. What's the wildest thing you ever expected from a president as a kid or as an adult, if you're honest? I'll take anybody's answer.
Expected? Like anticipated? I expected John F. Kennedy to have an affair with Marilyn Monroe. That was my expectation.
In your short pants?
And I was... No,
you were a full adult by that point. You were a full adult by that point, Rob.
I believe that was my first wartime deployment. Yeah, I was on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. I was catching the
Hill
news.
364, long dock.
Well, I expected a very dramatic and quick pullout from OEF.
Oh, I thought you were about to say Monica Lewinsky, but okay.
That was after the fact. Okay. After the fact. But that quick drought did not happen.
Which president, though?
Well, it went through multiple presidents. If nothing else, at least from Trump. Given all the complications that go along with those decisions, I fully understand the hesitancy. But it's interesting because even the Republican agenda of let's pull people out, nothing really happened. We did not move out significantly in those 4 years.
All right, Keith, you got anything?
Oh, man, that's easy. I mean, it's going to be boring, but wildest, like something with a rocket.
Flying cars, man. Flying cars.
That was what I was. That was all my hope.
Which president were you thinking was going to build a rocket flying car?
I mean, I grew up with Reagan. He seemed to be able to do anything. So
he did.
I'm just going to build a flying car.
And
he let you down.
Speaking of projection,
Gipper let you down.
That guy wore it well.
He did.
He really did.
He was our second dad. Yeah.
Absolutely. He had that affable conservatism. It was comforting.
He looks good in the suit.
He did. He did. Central casting.
With a top coat and the suit.
Yeah.
I could see it gave you the warm fuzzies, Rob, in your late 60s.
Now that you're in your 90s.
Oh, it reminded me of Bedtime for Bonzo.
Nothing like middle-aged jokes, guys. Nothing like them.
The great cinematic experience that Bedtime for Bonzo was.
Let's get this show kicked off. To start off, I am David. I am a board-certified psychiatrist. I've got 20 plus years in the military. I am still the tech guy, mainly because I'm working with a bunch of old people who just don't do tech quite as well. I'm sure we'll get somebody younger on at some point who will just be so much better at it than me. But until then, I am starting off today with a tin cup bourbon. I want to say this one is probably not nearly as fancy or nice as the one that Amit had the last time we got to see him. Still pretty good. It's a straight bourbon aged in charred barrels.
And it came with a tin cup, tin whiskey cup.
I will know just how much too much is by the end of this show.
Mine was copper colored. Interesting.
That's because mine probably cost a lot less than yours and is actually made of tin, possibly lead. So we'll see as the show goes on.
You probably paid more than for Jim Crow, though.
As the neurologic symptoms stack up, we will know it's lead. So
today I will be.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Rob, 25 years psychiatry, board certified adult psychiatry. And because of the oddness of where I sit in the world and the time frame right now, I have no bourbon. I'm drinking coffee, lovely French press.
It's like morning bourbon.
So I'm bourbon less. If I had some Irish whiskey, I might do an Irish coffee, but I do not.
Just keep telling your bosses that. Wink.
Yeah.
I'm Keith, 25 years, board certified psychiatrist, addiction doc. I'm drinking tonight. It's a Campbell, California vintage, I think circa 2 or 3 months ago, a V8.
V8.
That's what I'm rocking this with.
Really keeping on brand here today.
That's
everybody. I just want to appreciate everybody. Thanks, everyone.
It is a serious component of a breakfast drink, so not bad.
And our special guest, again, we have wonderful Amit.
Well, thanks for having me back.
Thanks for being back.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. I decided to actually go with some Irish whiskey today. So I'm supporting Rob here with this, morning Irish coffee here. I'll have the Irish part of his coffee while he drinks his regular coffee. Pretty damn good.
Is it in a crock? You know how you can buy it? It's in a ceramic crock.
It is not. I will look for that for next time. It is in a plain old boring bottle. But you know what? It was for St. Patrick's Day. So it did come with a little,
Look at
a
that.
little Irish flower.
Well, there you go. I just think it means Amit's going to be ready to fight later at the end of the show. He'll be ready to fight. He'll be ready for the fisticuffs, Robbie. So get your singlet ready.
Quick Irish story. So a few years back, I was commanding a mission and found myself in the interesting position of being in a conference with a 4-star general. He commanded all of the United States forces, continental United States. So I'm in a Teams meeting, and this is early in the pandemic where I can't say I was an expert at Teams stuff. And he had
Can you say you are now?
No, I'm not still, but I know how to use a mute button now. What I lacked at that point was a mute button. He had a very Irish name. So I was I had my staff around me, and I was doing a Lucky Charms impression. And he was like, Are you doing Lucky Charms?
Oh, no.
Man, I immediately, sir, I don't even know the protocol at this point. Should I snap to attention? What should I do? What should I do? I apologize. And he's like, no, I was good.
Sir, it's my favorite cereal. I can't help it. It's breakfast time. It's the pandemic. No, sir, I was ordering breakfast. The television's on in the background. My apologies. Commercial.
He was a good sport, and he outranked me by about double. So at that time,
and maybe why you're in that wooden shack of a room with no whiskey right now. For all you know.
That is exactly why.
Maybe.
Can't figure out why his career is taking such a downward spiral. We were on the internet complaining.
It's petered, yes.
But here we are, alas. Today, we're going to continue our conversation, as derailed as it got, on projection on presidents. To start, let's just rehash for anybody who is not willing to go back and listen to the previous episode. Why waste the hour, right?
Exactly.
Why waste an hour of your life or 30 minutes if you like to listen to things on high speed, which I highly recommend you do when listening to us. To start, Rob, can you give us just a quick rundown of what projection is for those who are late to class?
Yeah, the concept from Freud, we would take our internal world, our own hopes, dreams, fears, inadequacies, etc., and we would project those out onto whoever the other is and see those things in other people. Quick example, you're feeling irritable. You don't necessarily understand why you're feeling irritable. And lo and behold, you see irritability in your spouse. It's uncomfortable for you to experience that. It is easier for you to experience it by seeing it elsewhere, where you can sort of blame and have an emotional reaction rather than manage it yourself.
Agreed.
Rob, and you said it really well. I think you blended some early Freud drive thoughts with the more Kleinian psychology, where what you were putting out there, that when the infant is faced with something that's existential or incredibly anxiety provoking, they split that reality off. They put it out onto the mother or father, usually. They're the object, and then they relate to that object. But it's all a way, like we talked earlier about cognitive dissonance. I think more like emotional dissonance. Two emotions at odds, right? You have to add something, or you have to split those two apart to reduce that. So this is all based out of, fearful existential anxiety. It's a very primitive, non-adaptive way to resolve and soothe yourself. Usually only done naturally by infants. I think we're seeing a lot of that now in folks that are not infants.
So what you're saying is there's a lot of infants out in the real world nowadays.
Feeling like infants, right? Managing feelings and tension through infancy defense mechanisms.
Please take care of me, please.
Fundamentally, where I have found myself interested in projection and the idea of projecting onto our leaders is it amplifies during times of uncertainty and angst, and we're in kind of an infantile stance with the government. We have very limited ability to truly engage with the government, make things happen with the federal government, at least now locally. We've got a great deal of power. We can engage, we can help our communities, we can help the people around us. But at this particular juncture, we're very much focused on federal politics. In that stance, we can vote every 2-4 years, but we really have limited ability to affect anything at that level, which fundamentally places us in an infantile stance. The idea, somebody fix it, somebody help me, which may accentuate our tendency toward projection. And politics have utilized projection for time immemorial to affect their elections.
It's not just coming from the constituents, but also invited from the candidates themselves, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So projection can be positive. Projection can be negative. Positive projection is projecting your hopes and this person's going to fix it all. This person's powerful. This person knows what to do. It can also be negative. We can project our fears and our uncertainties onto the party. So each party wants all the positive projection. They maximize that. And then they also want to push all the negative projection onto the other party. Here's an example. So historically, Democrats will say that the Republicans are serving the elite, serving the wealthy, when the reality is that if you look at where they're getting their campaign contributions, they're heavily tied into the elite Silicon Valley ultra wealthy individuals. They're doing the same thing. They're following the money because everyone has to follow the money in order to get elected. But it's how they frame it and how they invite it guides that positive and negative projection.
We've covered what projection is. We have spoken about that a lot. When you have a lot of positive projection, you place so much onto one person. One of the major challenges with this level of projection can just be the fact that what's being believed or placed upon this person is something that simply isn't possible because the role of presidency can't affect that kind of change. So that inevitably leads to a bursting of the bubble. What happens then?
I'd take issue first with it. I'd argue that there really is no positive projection. I mean, positive if you're 6 or 8 months old. It's the only thing you got going to soothe yourself. But in an adult, whether the negative or the positive projection really is it good or bad, really it's more a question of is it adaptive? When you say positive projection is, let's say, something dramatic like we're at war and your commander's leading you in a war and you're projecting what we would call positive attributes to that leader, pride, bravery, intelligence, whatnot. That's a very primitive, psychotic-like defense, but in that moment, in that situation, it's adaptive, so we're calling it good. Could also be very maladaptive. Someone who is very sick and was wounded very much can project positive feelings onto a very evil person to literally psychotically change the reality of that person from bad to good. And that's, I think, what you're all referring to as like a positive projection, but it's incredibly maladaptive. So I would argue that no, none of it's ever really helpful. It's a thing we can do when we're very, very stressed. And I think that's what we're getting at. We are very, very stressed and using infantile-based defense mechanisms to make sense of our world. And then the more we do it, the more at risk. It becomes a very concerning time.
I mean, I don't think a projection is ever really being helpful. Outside of maybe, like Heath mentioned, some developmental stages. Because at what point you're only setting yourself up for failure or disappointment. Rarely do those projections, no matter what the intention is, lead to really, really good things. Typically, it's a matter of, hey, I have fears, insecurities, feelings that I want to disavow from myself because it's too uncomfortable to think about, or it's causing me distress to think about them. So I don't want to think about them. And then I think you mentioned, like the last episode, Rob, was if you're lazy, you don't want to be seen as lazy, and your best defense is offense. Other people are lazy. I see this, and therefore they must be doing this because they're lazy. And you take these innocuous day-to-day routine happenings as confirmation because you're just looking into the reasoning of, I know this person is this way, so therefore anything they do proves it. And it's rarely, if ever, useful. Typically, just I associate projection with that negative connotation of leading yourself into trouble. You're going to have interpersonal problems.
Yeah, and you mentioned confirmation, right, which made me think of our confirmation bias. And I think that's probably an easier to access term. The basis of confirmation bias are these very infantile, primitive defense mechanisms. I have an example of how infantile, primitive defenses show up in day-to-day language and day-to-day worlds. If we have a very uncomfortable feeling, if we want something to be true, we look for ways to confirm that in everything we see.
If you're looking for it, you'll see it. That's typically how it works.
And for clarity, yes, I'm actually glad you corrected that. I was referencing more positive and negative emotion than positive outcome versus negative outcome. That you can project the evils and your frustrations and your fears and your own inadequacies, and that results in a negative emotional experience. You can project also your hopes and your wants, and I need to be protected. I think your example of like a wartime leader is perfect. Functionally, leaders take advantage of that because they absolutely want their soldiers to project a sense that they are powerful and they know what's going on. They are brave and whatever else in order to get the best out of the unit. I was referencing the valence of the emotion, not necessarily the outcomes.
Yeah, projecting the idea that the leader could solve every problem that I have, the hopes that the next president is going to come in and make everything better. And that is somehow going to result in anything positive. It is a positive thought, but certainly not positive in any other way. Then what? Because inevitably, what I'm really doing is setting this person up for serious failure if it's something they're inviting upon themselves by saying, I can do all of this stuff. I'm going to make it all better. But they can't, whether it's because it's just an impossible thing, it's something that their job actually can't do. There's just something that people are hoping will happen that's not possible. They don't control Congress. They don't control the Fed. There's going to be fallout when those things don't occur. To move on to that point, there is naturally going to be either a great deal of disappointment, emotional fallout. What does that look like? What ends up happening? What are those phases that people can go through when they are projecting so much onto one person, not just for them, but for that person as reality starts to set in, because that's what that is, projecting fantasy.
It's easy to make promises, I can get this done, if there's not enough accountability, or accountability is easy to forget. You can make yourself out to be the best possible person for the job. So I think that's relatively normal. I think most people probably don't make tell promises because they know there's going to be at a certain point an performance evaluation or some sort of accountability where they can't just walk out of it. However, with some of these positions, national stage, once you're elected, you're elected. It's really rare to lose your position. You don't get impeached unless your party no longer supports you. It's a political thing. It is not a let's weigh everything on each individual person's actual performance or fault and benefits.
So since we're attempting to see this in the big picture, the national picture, how our citizenry is responding, Keith, I feel like you're on to something that is particularly relevant, and your Kleinian perspective resonates with me at this particular juncture. So could you possibly approach that again as what you said earlier about the infantile stance?
When we say it in the right words, it's really easy to understand. And think about it for a moment. Most of us can kind of feel it. And then we're like, oh, I get it. At a very, very young age, when you're dissonant on the inside, when you're uncomfortable with conflicting, say mom or dad's supposed to be all good, but then they do something that disappoints you. You're not getting food on time or something. At that level, that's a crisis of life. That's everything holding you together. And those two things are at odds. A very good thing and a very bad thing, all mixed into one. So you have good things and bad things about everything. And sometimes they're too overwhelming and it creates anxiety and discomfort. So a very primitive baby-like thing to do is to split them. All good goes in one box, all bad goes in another box. And then you take those boxes and you push them out of you onto an object. Those tend to be parental figures. And then you're free of that discomfort. And then you can go back to being soothed. It's the only option they have at that age.
Yeah. As you were talking, and that's referenced as a paranoid-schizoid split.
It is.
In technical parlance. I found myself thinking, I'm doing this. I personally am doing this to my federal leaders, the politicians of this nation. And I wonder the dynamic that has me in a position in which I feel relatively powerless, which creates a great deal of anxiety. There's a tension that sits in my chest because I see the problems. I am uncertain about the future. I'm worried for my children, and my coping style has become much more primitive. As you're talking, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in the midst of this. And it makes me wonder, is that part and parcel of what we're seeing with this division, the extent of the division that we see nationally, the two camps that fight rather aggressively and really are diametrically opposed because we're setting in a paranoid-schizoid split.
Yeah, well, a couple points first, right? Before we jump to what you're asking.
What does that mean? Hold on. Paranoid-schizoid split.
I apologize. I went into jargon mode. The tendency of an infant to want the adult in their life, the parental object of their life, that when that parent meets their needs, they are all good. When that parent doesn't meet their needs, they're hungry. They've got a dirty diaper and they're uncomfortable because of it, and the parents not fixing it, rather than integrating the concept that this is a human who is imperfect and maybe trying their best but failing. It is a split that happens in our brain in order to manage this, in which we see someone as all good or all bad. And the goal of growing up is the ability to integrate that, to see people for the complexity that they are. They may fail me. That does not mean they're bad. They may help me. It does not necessarily mean they're good. They are a complex person. But our infantile stage, Melanie Klein coined the term paranoids. I think it was her that coined the term paranoid-schizoid split, which is this sort of seeing things as an all good or all bad.
I think you said that really nicely. You were talking about your own internal tension, conflict, or crisis, and maybe feeling a little bit more primitive. But like the fact that you're able to talk that way about it is light years beyond the paranoid schizoid split, right? Like what we're talking about, these aren't thoughts that are at dissonance, creating conscious anxiety. These are unconscious things that threaten the sense of just overall safety. That's and the schizoid psychotic part of it is, at that age, you can change reality, and then it becomes a new reality you interact with. Works then, but in today's world, right, it doesn't work at a national level. When people start responding more to those unconscious, existential, life meaning anxieties, reality for that person can change. You can see one thing, you can see one and call it two, and it's real. And I think we see some of that happening. The problem with that is there's no room in the middle. So Rob, what you're talking more about, and I think David, what you referenced, is like what happens when it all comes down. Well, like two things can happen. You can be like Rob and integrate it and feel anxiety and discomfort about it, but you're not existentially at risk. Or two, you can go deeper into the schizoid paranoid split. You can become more primitive, more psychotic, and change your reality around you as you need. And that soothes you. That's some of what we're seeing. And because of that, there's just nothing in the middle. There's no integrated middle where people can have discourse.
You make your way all the way to flat earther.
It's a great example of how just you can change reality, and you just keep changing it and keep changing it and keep changing it, so you don't have to have the crisis of I'm wrong at something that is organizing my life.
Well, there's definitely something that you'll see with this cult. You'll have a group of people who are absolutely sure that this is the end of days. They'll be sitting out on their lawn, ready for the end of the world, absolutely convinced this is it. Last night on earth. The night will come, it will be gone. The next day will show up, and it's not the end of days. A couple of them will realize, well, that was BS, and they'll wander off, and that'll be it. They'll be done with that cult. The rest of them who stay around will say, this was evidence that we were right. We've saved the world, right? This is further evidence that we were that much more correct. Whatever we did saved everything. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like that person that said, well, this was bullshit. I've been bamboozled. That's a neurotic, integrative, anxiety way, a more mature way to handle that. Then the folks that are like, this proves that we were right. That's the unconscious, primitive, schizoid position where you change reality versus the conscious position where you're like, oh, this makes me anxious. I feel bad. I was dumb, but I need to go on. That's very conscious and much more adaptive.
That requires you to say that you were wrong. You can be fooled, which not everybody is able to do, which leads to that position of the schizoid position of, no, I need to change reality to really fit my viewpoint, more prevalent, especially lately.
So, Amit, as someone who treats children, age-wise, if you look at the nation, because I think that paranoid-schizoid split is a relevant concept, and maybe always has been. I'm just seeing it now because in my short lifespan, going back to FDR in my short pants up to the present, it does feel more relevant right now. So I'm seeing this, we'll use the term psychotic, and that might be inflammatory to some of our tens of listeners, but a psychotic in that it is the reality base of some of the, say, conspiratorial belief structure that we're seeing now in certain sectors, which honestly is kind of part and parcel of the American political landscape. We've always been paranoid. It probably started back when we were colonists and all the decisions were being made far, far away, and we weren't involved in it, and we were tempted to imagine the worst and imagine that there were big forces against us, etc. But from a child and adolescent standpoint, when you're treating children, what age do you see them attempting to make this transition, I
I
should
mean,
say?
the classic paranoid schizoid split is really, really early. I mean, you're talking months, first few
Yeah.
months of life. And it is Melanie Klein, by the way. So
Okay.
your memory is accurate.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're doing well in your old age.
Drink, everyone.
So it should be happening super early, but the problem is that it's not static per se. So when we're in enough distress, enough stuff is going on, environment plays a role in it, caretakers play a role in this as well, you will regress. What happens is that if you put enough pressure, enough distress, people will go back, kids will go back, and they will start going back to those early stages that they might have mastered in that moment. But no, now they're back in that same fear of, hey, what can I trust? What can I do? My needs are not being met. If you have kids who are really deprived, that can happen at any age, really, but especially, school age or earlier, you'll see that more because they're much more dependent on their caregivers. They haven't really developed their own sense of self yet. And so for them, not being able to feel safe, not being able to have their needs met, really exacerbate those symptoms of, can I really take care of myself? Classically, you're looking at fear of obliteration.
Yeah.
Can this individual who has so much power over me, they decide my existence? Versus, can I really maintain my own ego integrity? Can I maintain my own sense of self with all this stuff going on? How much of my parents do I integrate, make part of myself versus what's me? I think so early on, it's more towards so school age kids, maybe earlier, leaning towards the fear of persecution and fear of being annihilated. How do we deal with that? And then I think later on, especially teenage years, you're getting to the other aspect of regression to, how do I maintain my own identity? How do I have all these influences around me and they have very strong opinions? How do I navigate the fact that I have different opinions on what it means to treat other people and what it means for my sexuality, what it means for what person is good or bad? They might conflict dramatically with the caregivers around them. I see a lot of angst around that and working through that. I do think that developmentally, I'm seeing more and more regression overall. So more and more teenagers, young adults, especially in the military, they lead relatively sheltered lives, going from one environment where things are a certain way to a much more heterogeneous population where there's a lot more differing opinions. That makes it a very drastic shock and leads to some of these concerns of, I need to double down and kind of hold things in and keep my perspective versus, wow, that's really interesting. I didn't even know that was a thing, which would be a healthier way of proceeding.
That's a great example of what are the two options when the comes crashing down. You can have what they would call integrated depression, and you begin to develop an ego and a sense of separate self, and you have all these other fantasies about primitive objects around you, and those start to come together. And if you can integrate them and still stay a whole separate person, but you enter into more of a depressive, anxious, mixed state. So, Dave, you asked, well, what's going to happen from this? Well, you can either take that uncomfortable depressed state, not like clinically depressed, but contemplative and anxious state. Or you can, as Amit was saying, you can double down. And those are the two options. We're seeing the doubling down.
So what happens when it's not a person doubling down? What happens when it's a group of people doubling down?
It's a social hysteria.
You have this disappointment in somebody who's not meeting the expectations that's been placed upon them.
Societal, we have the Salem witch trials. That's something we all kind of know about, is what we're talking about.
That's going back even further than Robbie's days. That's going like way back. That's fine. We could talk about it, but even Robbie, Robbie barely remembers the Salem witch trials.
Well, I was very
he cut his teeth, right?
Fully a million, yeah.
That's what happens in the society. There's a societal hysteria where you can believe certain people are witches. That's an older example, but a stark one. We're doing the same thing now. We're having hysterical, like society level, primitive hysterical emotional responses and having witch burning.
The concept of scapegoating, where you have the person who's now being
scapegoat, right? Very common vernacular term for an object of paranoid projection, scapegoat. Yeah.
Someone must be at fault. It's not me. So therefore, it is this person. In family therapy, there's always an identified scapegoat. It is this child who is making our family fall apart. Never mind that mom and I are completely dysfunctional and there's stuff going on, but this is the individual that's making things hell for us. And so sometimes when you fix that, the family dynamics change dramatically, and you really figure out, okay, well, that wasn't really the problem, was it? It becomes problematic. But I think tying it back to our discussion and looking at the politics currently and the society currently, we see that in our political viewpoint. If you have a candidate or a party that is promising certain things and they get to a point where they can make decisions, and practically speaking, there's compromises that need to be made, or certain things aren't happening because the promises made were much too ambitious or unrealistic, that turns into a, hey, you have sold out, betrayed us, or insert whatever phrase you want in there. The deep state has influenced the decision, and this whole conspiracy type mindset, this is what is getting in the way of making these promises. Therefore, we need to try harder. We need to fire these people, we need to elect more people, and we need to move forward, again, doubling down and do more of this to make that same result happen, because we lost our soldiers who were trying to do this.
David, you had your finger up like you had something really important to say.
I wanted you to read the chat.
Dude, I didn't even know we had a chat.
We have a chat.
He said
I've been putting notes in the whole time.
You said your eyes are pretty, Rob.
Said your beautiful eyes, Rob. For grandpa eyes.
It is my defining feature. All right, let's integrate this, because
no, it's fine. What I wanted you to jump on, what he spoke about, and what really is a good discussion, was the family therapy topic, and the fact that a lot of the focus ends up getting put on like the one kid, but everyone's ignoring the fact that the whole family is dysfunctional.
And Amit's example, the child that the society, the family is saying is causing the problems. That's a living example of what Rob was talking about with object relational paranoid-schizoid type splits. That's a living example of it. So we say this child, who really is innocent, they're a child, is causing all the problems for us. And then we take all of our ugliness and we split it. We now project that onto the child. Now they're the bad object. They're just bad. But that helps us feel more comfortable. We're not bad. That thing is bad. That person is bad. That's what we're doing at a societal level. We will say, well, this thing happened. It makes me so uncomfortable. I'm going to shift it around so much to make that thing bad, and holding all the badness. And then I can fight. I can fight against it, and anything's justifiable.
What we talk about is the psychological factors of the nation. And so when we extrapolate that scenario out to the country as a whole, and the scapegoating that happens when you have that disappointment that's coming down on somebody.
Yeah. You'll have mass hysteria.
So if we were to take the example of family therapy and apply it to the country and the scapegoating example, what does that look like?
It looks like World War II.
What is somebody who's not able to see that, who's listening to us, look at and say, oh, I can kind of see that. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think you see it right now, where the one party is led by a mass projection, right, towards their leader, and their leader cannot make a mistake. Their leader can't do wrong. And when the leader does something that seems confusing or makes a mistake or wrong, then it gets corrected to, it wasn't a mistake, it was good, or it didn't happen. Or the bad object, right, on the other side of politics, that person is the reason why this bad thing happened to this good person.
Who's creating the scapegoat?
Well, it's a mass. It's not a personal psychological dynamic at this point. It's a mass primitive hysteria.
But that's an important factor, right? You have this major issue where people believe that it's just one person who's saying, well, no, it's actually kind of normal that this occurs. This happens on these.
It's a shared collective unconscious.
Yeah. And it's
that's. Yeah.
I'm going to blame the bicycle man from Different Strokes.
He's still around?
Mr. Nussbaum, from
Willis and his shirtless friend.
That's my scapegoat.
What you talking about, Willis?
Yeah, what you talking about, Willis? That's my scapegoat. No, but
run.
Run, no doubt. Don't drink the wine. Don't drink the wine. Mr. Nussbaum is not to be trusted. What I personally am seeing is, and I'm going to reference it as the 4D chess phenomena, that when mistakes are made, something doesn't fit with the narrative, the response is, at this particular juncture in a certain sector of our population, is that the politicians are playing 4D chess. It is beyond our explanation. They are so smart and so brilliant that this doesn't fit, but it's gonna fit. It's just that we're not smart enough to understand it at this juncture. And that's how we're maintaining as a culture.
The wrench in here is that anybody can make up an explanation as to what's going on, no matter how far-fetched it is. And as long as it's sensationalizing, really interesting, it will garner views and support. And suddenly you might have 20 different things that explain in a very interesting way what's going on, whether that's on Reddit or TikTok or whatever. It's going to shape the narrative. And then suddenly it becomes a valid reason for what might be happening. Nowadays, it's much more confusing. Whatever party it is, whatever narrative it is, because some of those things will reach national media level, right? Hey, 2 million views. What's going on? Is there some truth to this? Just because, again, confirmation bias, participation bias, that if you have enough people believing it strongly, it's true.
The attention economy.
One of the key points that we were trying to make is that this is not something that is always planned as much as something that is an inevitability of the projection that is put forth.
Mm-hmm.
The projection can be made by the people and it can be invited by the candidate, something that's manufactured, but the fallout from either failure of it, success of it, or perception of what that projection is leads in certain directions depending upon your ability to tolerate what that fallout is. What we see with that fallout, and we've been seeing a lot more of over the last decade or so, is a lot more polarization.
Absolutely.
Yes, there's a significant amount. And I look back through my extensive life that David likes to point out.
You're 150 years at this point.
Well, when you go back to the Salem witch trials,
bacon and bourbon.
It's bacon and bourbon truly is the secret of my success. But
do you smoke Salems or?
Oh, no, bacon, bourbon, and cigarettes. I mean, that absolutely has kept me alive this long. You have to get up in the morning and smoke a Salem to inflate your lungs. You just,
there you go.
Yeah. So
when you're alive since the Salem witch trials, I think they burned the wrong people.
Potentially. Let me shift this.
That derailed Rob completely from his point.
Yeah. Which happens so often. I have these wonderful thoughts, and then by the time I get to them, after
dealing with the jackassery,
after the jackassery, I lose my point. But here's something I guess
we're talking polarization, Grandpa.
We are, but I'm taking it a different direction. So how much of the projection that we have, how much of that actually impacts the leader, the weight of it?
Well, I think tremendously.
I do as well. But when we think about, there's this interplay that's happening. It's the leadership capitalizing upon projection as much as they can to scapegoat, to promote the paranoid-schizoid split, or the psychotic kind of paranoia, conspiracy theories, etc. Think Jeffrey Epstein at this particular juncture. But then they have to absorb that. They have to sit with it. And as it turns out, they're human too. So they're experiencing all the same things that the rest of us as humans experience. And because they are in that position, we can forget that. We can forget that they are human. But the weight of this, trying to manage this, has to be crushing and has to result in them this same dynamic that we're experiencing, but magnified. 330 million people. It really has to be almost overwhelming. And I do not know how a president makes it through their time in office without absolutely losing touch with reality.
I think, Rob, it also depends a lot on their personality. If your leaders have a very, very balanced, and I really need to cater to my nation, and I'm in this because I want to help, that's the mindset, then I agree. I would think it'd be really difficult because you're going to disappoint people no matter what. That's just the nature of business, no matter what you're doing. Some people will be happy, some people will not be happy. However, we also know that a lot of successful leaders don't care about what other people think. And what they do is the right thing, no matter what the results are. So that's not my mindset, but if that were to be my mindset, I can imagine I would certainly be perfectly fine with whatever the rest of the nation thinks, as long as I am able to win my re-election.
And it might be grist for another mill, but it's a discussion about the personality that one would have to even want to run for president. Look at LBJ and the sheer weight of the projection that was placed upon him that we spoke about last time. He crumbled underneath it to the point where he didn't even run again. He didn't run for president. So him being thrust into that position and then having the weight of JFK's projections on him, I think says a lot.
And I think on a countryside, you can look at what happens as a result. So if you have certain hopes and things are going a certain way, you project it onto your party, your leadership. They don't get to where you need to be. There's only two ways you're getting out of that. One is something is wrong. Maybe I can't trust people or I'm wrong. Then that leads to I can't trust politics at all versus what's the point? Maybe that starts getting to nihilism, as we discussed earlier. That's one route. The other route is doubling down. What is wrong with them? They sold out. They are not doing what they're supposed to. They should have only done this. Why can't they just sign the damn agreement? Why can't they just pass this law? Therefore, there's something wrong with them, leading to further conspiracy theories, further projection of what else could have gone wrong, finding some naysayers, evil entities that got in the way. And then you just build upon that. Next time we will defeat them. This is what we need to do. This is the new popular movement. Defeat this obstacle into getting what we want done.
David, your point of your question on societal level, an example of this concept I'm going to mention is if we think about this primitive infancy stuff and we look at that as a society, when you're at that level, which I would argue a lot of large social groups are at very primitive levels, that's sort of as high as they rise. When you're at that level, you will integrate, you will tolerate the anxiety to protect your existence if there's an external threat. We tend to do better as societies, and I'm not advocating we need to find an external threat, but that external threat also meaning we have a shared sense of why we're existing or a shared sense of what threatens it, something we rally around. When that's lacking, you see these things come out and more starkly. But when there is an external threat, those two sides that are disintegrated will sort of agree to cooperate and be integrated because there's an external threat. And I would argue our nation's been really safe and kind of boring for decades and decades. And I think as a nation, we're not feeling threatened much anymore. We get more complacent, and then those object parts start to split apart. Where, Rob, you've brought up the point, if there was a major world war that threatened the United States of America, we would get much more healthy as a country, not for great reason. It's a terrible thing to be at war, but the society would look more integrated and harmonious because now the threat is external and we all can act against it together. And I think that's a question of, well, how do you try to create that without a war? That's awful. But how can you create a shared sense of need to work together to survive as a group? We're lacking that right now. We think we can survive as separate groups.
We are lacking that. And there are multiple threats. They're just very difficult to define. It's resulting in a sense of ennui. We sit at a point that the threats that we're facing are very difficult to define in specific terms. So much easier to say Russia, Soviet Union, China. That's the threat. When there's a well-defined threat, it is easier for us as a nation, as a person, to integrate that and be cohesive. When the threat is nebulous, and right now the threat is very nebulous. It's the economy, the changing sense of values in the nation currently, creating the tension. That makes it significantly harder, probably because there is a nebulous threat. It sets us up as a culture because fundamentally, when you're a culture of millions and millions of people, ends up being the lowest common denominator.
Well, I think, Rob, at that point, you start talking about what's in it for me, getting back to your bottom dollar. When the nation's not at a threat, you're not trying to come together to secure everybody's future, because that does bring camaraderie. It turns into I'm suffering. How can I spend less money? I want less taxes. What's happening locally to assist my community? And it becomes a lot about me, or regional, as opposed to, hey, some of these things we might have to take a hit for the good of the nation. Like, this is actually better policy. We have a very strong history of individualism, protectionism, individual rights, liberties. We don't have a strong history of protecting national interest. When we do try to do that, there's always a lot of pushback from whatever party that's not in power. Take big tech. Is it in our interest globally to be dominating? Absolutely. If we had Google and Apple and all these companies that were solidified across the EU, Australia, wherever, it is a big soft power for the United States. It is a big deal because there's not a big overlying fear regarding global dominance. We look at things like, hey, does Google have too much power? Does Apple have too much power? Going to all the antitrust acts. Locally speaking, yes, we make things different and we hold those companies accountable. However, globally, it weakens their influence. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, but I will tell you that it definitely is a bad thing when it comes to U.S. tech dominance across the globe, because that actually ultimately helps us. That actually ultimately helps our interests.
Dave, I saw your thought around limiting or editing the power of the president, maybe as an integrative exercise. Can you say what you're thinking with that?
Some ways to help break this cycle of projection, disappointment, conspiracy projection that happens on a larger scale. There might be people to affect some change. I'm trying to play host.
No,
So
you're making a very valid point that if we are going to mirror the development of a human, we go from this paranoid-schizoid split that we've said multiple times, but that's in infancy. And then as you progress as a human, your challenge is to integrate that and see people in the limits that they have. And one of the things that we should do, and honestly, our government's set up for this, is that the different branches of our government are limited in their power scope, and they're supposed to be limited in their power scope. And falling back to that each branch has a responsibility, and that responsibility helps us see the limits of the individual branches, that this branch, the executive branch, cannot accomplish everything. They just can't. If we start from the stance that these individuals are limited by law, history, tradition, and custom, then maybe that helps us limit the expectations. But at this particular juncture, it does feel like our expectations are the executive branch can fix it all, everything. They are omnipotent in terms of their ability to fix, and they're not, nor should they be, because no one individual can have all the answers.
David, your point about educating more on the role and limits of the presidency as a solution, I think that's near impossible unless the societal thought all agrees to integrate this sort of crazy space we're in now, where society would have to agree we're going to raise our kids with this notion, very neurotic notion that takes a lot of energy to hold separation of power within the presidency. We kind of see when that energy goes away, what happens, it regresses. It's far easier to not do that. Like, that's a very neurotic, anxious thing to do, is to teach your kids these things about boundaries. But like, you have to come together as a society to agree to that. And it's a big ask to go from very primitive to much more developmental. And I would wager that's not a good solution. That's not a practical solution. I'm not sure it's going to happen. We'd all have to agree to teach our kids these things, and who's going to agree on almost anything right now?
And that's rendered us speechless.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty downer perspective. None of the recommendations I would say are going to be guarantees, but they're definitely routes to improve things. I wouldn't lean on any one single one as being the end all be all of solving the problem. The point is to discuss the gamut of options, to say there are a lot of steps. If we're being really honest, step one is doing what we're doing. It's to talk about what the situation is, how it comes about, why it is happening, and why it is probably actually quite natural. Before we say, this is how you make it better, we identify some of the things that could be done. It's going to be a voluntary process by which somebody might be willing to start taking those steps, but it's really difficult to take any steps if you don't understand at least even the basic part of it. So that's really what we're
back
at.
To civics class.
Well, it isn't necessarily civics class. It isn't just civics class. So that's part of it. That's a piece of it, would be to say, understand the roles. A next part of it would be, and I think this is probably even a bigger ask, to be honest with you, would be to say, is the media responsibility in the narrative framing, making sure, understanding that the media plays a huge role in whether they're either inflating or deflating what the projections are. The news coverage that's put into this horse race of this personality drama does amplify and make a candidate seem larger than life or not. There is a huge responsibility that's placed on the shoulders of the media. And one of the things that media could do, and I think that includes us, is to take these candidates, these people, as they are people, humanize them, understand them for the good that they bring, the human qualities that they have, the fact that they are going to make big promises because that's what they're expected to do, and understand that they're probably going to fail in those. That isn't because they want to fail, but because sometimes they're just not going to be capable of doing those things. But there is a healthy level of cynicism and realism that we can inject. That is just part of the role that we're playing.
I think we all can encourage each other, right, to want to come together, like as a concept, not how to do it. But if we can get into the society, into the zeitgeist, we'll put that on the board.
Break.
If we can somehow begin to build, usually like these things come from the bottom up. Maybe there's a charismatic leader that helps integrate. But if there's this bubbling up of just a value and aspiration, hope, as a nation, at some nebulous level, we want to be together, and that becomes a national priority. I think that's something we could try to encourage one another to integrate and to want to work as a team as an aspiration. How we get there, we can argue about. But if we could build more of that want, that demand, maybe there'll be a supply that comes to meet it.
Bomb just went off in your house, Keith.
Well, a thunder lightning storm bomb did. Yeah.
I agree. And I would argue that that's what we do. I think every week we're coming into people's homes, the tens of them that are listening, and we're offering up real ways that they can understand what's happening from a perspective that they're likely not going to hear elsewhere. We do it with this very tongue-in-cheek. We do it with bourbon, but we're offering up a perspective that other people don't have. And we offer up silly, but actually very, I think, realistic prescriptions to say, here's what you can do when you're struggling in this way. And that's just a piece of it. Our encouragement isn't to go out and vote for a particular candidate. It's not to believe in any particular viewpoint, to be on any side. It's to be centered for yourself. It's to find that more controlled understanding of what is going on around you.
I have a quote, so prepare to drink.
Hold on. I got to pour more if you're going to quote.
The quality of your relationship with an other is limited to the quality of your relationship with yourself. And what we're saying largely is that this is how you protect your kids from Mr. Nussbaum, is really what we're getting at.
Don't let them out of the house. They'll be good.
I do not know why he's entered my consciousness in such a profound way, but everything goes back to the very special episode of The Different Strokes. That really, in order to have a healthy stance with the government, with the world around you, it requires a healthy stance with yourself. Keith, we've lost you, bro.
He's muted.
The bombs are going off. I thought you didn't want to hear them.
We didn't.
But at a societal level, we want to encourage this sense of coming together. The risky thing is we may have two choices. One choice is there's a dramatic existential threat and things get better. Second choice is there's something as inspirational, aspirational that comes along, gives us a greater sense of something external we can strive towards. I think those are our two choices. We can do everything we can to encourage the latter. We would want people to feel more agency, more control in life, more management of anxiety by getting involved, by integrating. Mm-hmm. It's a healthier psychological position to get integrated, be part of the solution, however big, small your part is. Like to want to vote, because that's integrating and that's acting in the system, and you're gaining some sense of control back. That's a much healthier stance. I think we can encourage that, and as a society, we would all benefit from that.
So that sounds like a prescription.
Like it is.
I think it is.
I would want to avoid the war, World War III. Prescription to help us come together.
Don't do that.
Being largely a high probability of being on the cutting edge of said war, yes, I would like to avoid it. Please. However, I do think it would have a profound effect on our society.
Rob, do you have a prescription?
Keith gave a lovely prescription. I will say don't let your kids hang out at bicycle shops. That's my prescription.
Gotcha. That's advice, not a prescription. But all right.
Yeah.
It's like a fortune cookie prescription. Thanks, Rob. You and your coffee are really, really bringing it today. All right. I have a prescriptions. A question that we can always ask ourselves, and actually two questions I would say would be, am I putting all of my emotional eggs in one basket when it comes to my leader? And if I am, might want to start spreading those eggs around to other aspects of the government, saying who's actually responsible for the different people, or the different parts of what I'm expecting. And then the other question would be, once my candidate wins, if they win, good for you, and I think everything will be better, am I attributing unrealistic qualities to that person? Am I avoiding my own responsibility by expecting them to do it all? But just a little bit of realistic self-reflection.
I love that. Actually, I really appreciate that, because it does end up shifting the onus from, gee, fix it for me, to hey, I have some responsibility here. And that responsibility really, the scale is radically different, but the scale of the responsibility that we each have is in our homes, is in our communities. That is where we can make a difference. When you focus in the big picture, the federal picture, that focus is beyond us and is so easy to sit back and say they're messing it up. And this is projection, actually. This is a great example of projection. They're messing it up. They're not doing their job. Someone else would do it better, however it goes. But if that's the feeling that you have, then the first question that you should ask yourself is, how am I messing it up locally? How am I messing it up within my family structure? These anxieties about not being effective.
I think that's best done, Rob, staring into a mirror. Look at yourself.
Absolutely.
Look at your dumb face in the mirror and then say, what am I doing
dumb
wrong?
Face. Or look at David's.
Look at David's picture on the mirror.
No, my dumb face is what you meant my dumb face.
I did. You've got a dumb face. As do I. As do I. So there we go.
David, you said something a few minutes ago that really made me reflect and think about the things you were saying about, how to think about and how to approach, like to not put all your eggs in one basket. Right? It's fascinating, right? You're talking about DBT for the nation.
What do you mean by that, Keith? What do you mean
by DBT?
That's a whole new episode, Keith.
Yeah, so it's a dialectical behavior therapy. It's geared for those at the very primitive level of psychology. Someone suffering from, most people know the term borderline or borderline personality or disorder. If someone's functioning truly at a borderline psychotic, very primitive level, what DBT acknowledges is, Rob, you're talking a lot about introspection, to solve by looking inward. For someone who's that primitive in their defense, they can't. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. You will go psychotic. You can't do it. It's too overwhelming. So DBT acknowledges that and says, all right, we're not going to do that, but we're going to learn how to change our behaviors to be more boundaried, to do these things so that the future chance of an overwhelming crisis that you can't emotionally manage is less to occur. And then you have some ways to manage it too. But you're controlling your environment externally, not asking for introspection. That's a very high ask. So I thought you said it really elegantly. Just you could have described nice ways of, a psychological philosophy and approach and treatment of dialectical behavior therapy, but at a national level. I thought that was a great tie.
If Marsha Linehan is listening and is litigious, I did not intend for it to be perceived, thought, or in any way, shape, or form seen as dialectical behavioral therapy. What I'm intended it to be.
How do you do a copyright in this format?
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah. We're not using her manual, right? You're good.
There's no manual.
There's no manual being used.
I have nothing but bourbon.
Yeah, and let me add on to that, David. You brought this up earlier, but let me just kind of go down into this a little bit deeper. Two things. One, you can't just say, hey, you fix this problem for me. Doesn't matter who that is. What are you doing? Not just what's wrong, but what are you doing that's also right? What are you actually doing to solve the problem other than voting or getting other people to do it for you, right? What are you doing at a community level? I think that's important because then you're actually able to potentially make some effects, at least even locally, nothing else. The other thing is rating success and failure, going back to our splitting and borderline personality and DBT, looking at things fundamentally. Things are not just DBT. Black and white. Not DBT, yes. So things are not black and white. Things are not yes or no. There is a percentage. There is a variance spectrum on how things happen. So if your favorite politician was able to pass 2 out of the 10 things you really wanted them to pass, is that a failure? Is that a complete failure? No, it's 80% failure, right? I'm just making things even. Looking at things and say, hey, what was done right and what was done wrong? If just because they were not able to accomplish this 1 or 2 things does not make their tenure a failure. That does not mean that the party failed me. That does not mean that they are a bad person. Being able to look at things in perspective of what actually happened as opposed to for that just one specific thing that you're unhappy about. And if you're able to expand your viewpoint on that, I think that will make you probably a happier person.
Absolutely. And I have a silly one to close it out. So for a daily affirmation for anybody, bonus points if you put on a superhero cape and nothing else. So do your best.
I'll put on my kid's superhero.
There you go. Ooh,
I
even better.
got one more. I got one
Okay,
more, Dave.
do your one more first. Okay.
I got one more, and so you sort of inspired me here. As I do. It's happened, I suppose. As a behavioral homework that is integrating.
I think the Becks are
downstream.
really litigious, so be careful.
Yeah, as a homework, like a behavior we all can do that is healthy and leads to more integration and psychological wellness is look for the good in everyone. That it's not to be a hokey thing, but like literally look and try to find the good in everyone, no matter how you feel about that person. Look for the good. So that's just a neutral behavior, and it will lead to more integration and a healthier sense of who you are. And I haven't been able to do it in David yet, but I am working very hard.
Oh my gosh, it
My
is
dumb
rough.
face.
It is rough. So in the Army, we have this resiliency training that has become part of a requirement. In fact, anytime something becomes a requirement, it loses a little bit of value. But what they say, and something that I take with me actually, and I think about it, is hunt the good stuff. So hunt the good stuff in all these individuals. That there is something good. They're not all bad. They're not 100% anything. So you can find good things in both parties, any politician, the current state of the nation. You can find the good there. It does take effort, though. You have to make a conscious effort to do it.
If you want to be honest with yourself, if you really want to find the good, you can find the good. It doesn't mean you have to love everything that somebody does, but if you want to find a better path towards goodness, it's going to be really hard to find that if you're constantly at odds with everybody. And you certainly are going to be, as long as you are villainizing, demonizing everybody on the other side just because they disagree with you. Being able to find something good is a good way to bridge a gap. I have my silly one.
Yeah. Be silly, David.
Bonus points for wearing a superhero cape. If it's your kid's cape, I think you might get extra points. But do your best David Corn Sweat impression. Oh, Keith got excited. He just perked up.
He did.
Stand in front of the mirror and say to yourself, I do not need a president or politician to fix my life, but I do need more snacks. or bourbon, either or, whichever one you need more of. But that's just a good reminder, an affirmation that you don't
fascination
need.
With snacks, this absolute need for perpetual snacks. When did that become a thing?
I think that's always been a thing.
Men in capes. He brings it up a lot.
And men in capes.
Snacks and capes. What are you talking about? What's the problem?
We never had
snacks. It's been a long episode. All right.
In my opinion, for David, it has to be keto snacks.
All right. We're gonna close this one down. I'm gonna send out my invitation to any bourbon distilleries once again. Sadly, nobody's reached out to me to offer up free bourbon to review.
Shocking.
I know, right?
Terrible.
So
that's the only reason you do the show is the free bourbon.
They're really, but they will at some point. Somebody will beg us.
They will.
To. But no. But if you've stuck around, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Please do leave some comments on
smash that.
No, I was going to say
button.
that. I was going to say, oh yeah,
Facebook, TikTok.
Leave it. People are leaving comments on Facebook. I'm very much enjoying.
You're supposed to read them, David. We got to read those comments.
I do read the comments, and
on here.
We will. I don't know if I can do that.
No,
this is only explicit.
Explicit.
We're explicitly rated, but we are not. We're just not.
We're not NC-17. Got it.
We are not. We're not ready for that. Maybe when we get to the conspiracy theory topic, we will observe. But yeah, smash that subscribe. Shoot us an email. socials@shrinkthenation.com. We will happily read questions and give some answers.
Oh yeah, send us an
email. And we still read all your messages.
We do read all your messages. It's blast. I'm enjoying it. We are having a great time doing it. So that is it. We'll cue up the music.
Cue up the music, man.
And
we're out.
Until next time.